Well, we are back with our second episode of the week. We are breaking down the top five quarterbacks in the SEC and the Big 12 as we inch ever closer to preview season and games on the field. All that and more right here on the Three Technique.
One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going running all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
I give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in one and all to the Thursday edition of the Three Technique. Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney here, holding it down for you once again. Garrett, we are inching ever closer to kickoff as we are at 2 episodes a week, and eventually we'll be at 3 a week as we enter preview season here very soon. Dog days, though, very close to upon us. The college sports calendar is winding down with the College World Series beginning tomorrow as you guys are listening to this on a Thursday. And anything you're doing to prepare for these dog days where we don't have college baseball, we have a few sports on the docket, but it's really just counting down to the days of till football.
I got to tell you, man, that's the worst stretch for me is right after the College World Series. You get the MLB. That's fun. That's a good time. And you get the All-Star game and the Home Run Derby, and that's fun. But, man, there's just a slow crawl to the end of August. And, it's kind of fun once you get those, fall practice reports and you start to hear, oh, that guy's looking real strong. He's looking pretty fast. I think this guy might be the starter. And it's kind of fun, but, man, just a grueling crawl. So I spend most of my time in the pool. Spend a lot of time hanging out in the water and getting a lot of sunshine. And so, we're starting that process this summer. Hadn't been out there too many times. Been really rainy in North Texas, so hadn't had too many chances. But that's gonna break at some point. We're gonna get lots of chances to get out there in that dog day heat that you were just talking about. And so yeah, it's a fun way to spend it. But mostly I just spend my time floating around and waiting for college football to start up again.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do when I'm not gone, when I'm not here? College football says, and we just
Right.
say, wait for you back, right? Like
That's it. That's the whole thing.
this is the longest part of the off season that we're about to enter into. But keep it locked right here. We're going to keep you entertained. We're going to keep you informed as we enter camp season, talking season coming up really soon with media days, all that good stuff. And we can keep you informed thanks to our friends at Home Field Apparel, guys. Like I said, the College World Series starts tomorrow as you guys are listening to this. If you're heading up to Omaha, maybe you're listening to us on the interstate, heading to the Heartland to support your team. That's great. Hopefully you stocked up on gear from Home Field to support your team. And if not, there's still plenty of time to get your gear for this upcoming football season. Get those retro designs that you all know and love from the good brand Home Field Apparel, and use our code 3TechPod to get 15% off your first order, or the link in our Twitter bio to get 15% off a returning order at homefieldapparel.com. Garrett, we told the folks last episode that we have a big announcement, and that announcement is continuing today. If you didn't hear it last time, if you're just tuning back in, you are part of our preview season this year, or you can be by becoming an official Jimmy and Joe. You can do that on our Twitter page. It's linked right there at the top, pinned to the top of the page. You get to participate in preview season this year by ranking the teams in order that you think they're going to finish for the Power Four conferences: Big Ten, SEC, ACC, and Big 12. We had the Big Ten out on Monday morning, and you guys responded so well to that. You have another chance to make your voice heard with the SEC link out now on Twitter at 3TechPod and Instagram at 3TechPod as well. We'll even link it in the description of this video right here for you. I'll get Garrett on that. He's going to make sure that he does that when he puts this all together after we record. And guys, you get to have your voice heard. Not only that, every time that you enter, you are entered to win a chance at a $150 gift card for Home Field Apparel, so that you can have all of your apparel needs ready to go by the start of football season in August. So 4 conferences, 4 opportunities to make your voice heard, and 4 chances to win this home field apparel gift card. Garrett, a little birdie told me maybe we'll have a second prize too. Maybe we'll have a third prize. I don't know. I don't know if we'll have time, but keep it locked right here. We'll announce right now. It's a home field gift card. I'm just speculating. There might be another prize added next week for some extra incentive.
Trey, that is so many prizes. I don't know who this bird is that keeps telling you stuff, but that bird seems to know some things, and that's an exciting bit of news right there.
That bird hopefully has a high credit card limit, but we will make sure that I will personally guarantee, Garrett, that more than one winner will take home a prize. So if that's not enough incentive for you to go in there, fill out the form, make your voice heard, and track your predictions, man. Like, we go on record with all of our stuff. Go on record, snap a screenshot of your final rankings, and reply to that tweet. And show us what you got. Show us what you got for all 4 of those conferences. And again, be entered to win some fantastic prizes, including a $150 gift card from Home Field Apparel. Garrett, without further ado, we still have some time before we have to make our official predictions. But like we said on Tuesday's show, big part of that is analyzing the quarterbacks. And we're back to find the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and the Big 12 this week. If you didn't listen to Tuesday's episode, we knocked out the top 5 in the Big 10 and the ACC. Some really talented signal callers in those 2 conferences. But as always, I think the SEC is the cream of the crop this year. We'll get into that here in just a second. But the Big 12 has a lot of fun, intriguing quarterbacks as well. I can't wait to break that down with you on this episode. We'll start in the SEC. We'll start down south where it just means more. And we're going to start with the number 1 quarterback in the SEC this year. And that is, of course, Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. Totally kidding. If you haven't creamed off the road, I love my
Lock
boy.
your facilities, Tennessee. Diego Pavia is going to do bad things there.
The homeless man's Johnny Football is going to wreak havoc on the SEC this year. But he is not in our top 5. Spoiler alert, he did not make it.
Just missed him. He was in consideration.
In consideration, absolutely. In the 16-team SEC, our number 1 quarterback is Carson Beck at Georgia. A guy that in his first year as a starter had them right on the cusp of a college football playoff berth, undefeated all through the regular season. They come up just short against a highly motivated Nick Saban Alabama team in Nick Saban's what would ultimately be Nick Saban's last SEC game as a head coach. So Carson Beck, I think, did everything right last year, Garrett. Like, he had stretches without his number 1 receiver. He lost Brock Bowers. He leaned on Ladd McConkey a lot in those stretches, but there were times he didn't have Ladd McConkey either. And he did well to drive that bus. He has the most talent around him of any quarterback in the entire country, but it's not even that. That's not what makes him good. He's a good quarterback in his own right and would be pushing for this number 1 spot even if he didn't have all the talent around him. So much like Ohio State, though, the standard has been set very, very high at Georgia, and it's championship or bust. That is the standard that Kirby Smart has set out. So in order to live up to this number 1 ranking, he has to not only win the SEC, he has to probably go undefeated, and he probably has to at least make the championship game and see the chips may fall where they may in that one, but any given Saturday. But he has to at least make the championship game. So my question to you, he kind of got, a grace year last year, his first year as a starter, but much celebrated quarterback, highly recruited. Can he live up to that hype this year?
Absolutely. There's almost no chance that he doesn't, in my opinion. I think he's Heisman frontrunner. I think he's the guy who will probably end up winning it by the end of the season. I don't really understand the Carson Beck hate I've seen a lot around, right? There's a lot of people who are saying, oh, he didn't put up the flashy numbers. And I think a lot of those people probably only watched the SEC championship game and just didn't really watch Georgia play football last year. And I can't really blame you. Georgia dominated most teams they played last year. So if you weren't watching Georgia football, it's probably because you wanted to watch a competitive game. So I understand that. But look, Carson Beck is a very good quarterback, and he threw for almost 4,000 yards last season, completed 72% of his passes. If you had that number pretty much anywhere, we'd be talking about, oh, he's definitely the Heisman frontrunner. Oh, obviously he's going to be the best quarterback this year. And for some reason, people are just kind of sleeping on him because he's kind of just, I guess, boring and bland and throws to the big tight end and just kind of gets the job done. But I mean, isn't that what most teams end up wanting out of their quarterback, is a guy who just gets the job done, puts the ball where it needs to be, wins games, doesn't really do anything wrong? Like, he threw 6 interceptions last year. Not awesome for your first season, but he's playing some good teams. And, you're going to be, prone to make a couple mistakes, but 6 picks is still not that bad. 24 touchdowns, good number, right? He'll probably improve on that. I don't think there's a way that he stays under 4,000 yards or under 30 touchdowns this year, because he's going to have to kind of shoulder a little bit more of that burden. They're a run heavy team at Georgia, right? They're going to run the football a lot. It's a very balanced offense. And so he's not going to put up some of those massive numbers you see out of these, very pass happy offenses. But at the same time, he's doing everything you ask him to do and more. He's a leader. He's talented. He's got plenty of experience. The sky's the limit for Carson Beck and what the Georgia Bulldogs can achieve this year. There's a reason he's number 1 on our list.
And he's also the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman right now as we stand in June. It's a wide open Heisman race, I'll give you that, but he is the betting favorite at plus 750, edging out Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel for that honor. And yeah, I think you're right. I think in a vacuum, those numbers are fantastic, right? Almost 4,000 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 167.9 quarterback rating over his 14 games, last year. You're just asking too much if you're asking for more than that. Of course, he could score a few more touchdowns, but when you have running backs that can bust off a 50-yard run, you're going to limit your opportunities to score touchdowns, right? So he's probably not going to lead the NCAA in passing touchdowns this year, but if it's a year that it's the best player or the quarterback on the best team, he has a really good chance to be the last guy standing in New York with the Heisman Trophy.
And one thing I want to point out real quick, he only failed to reach 200 yards passing one time this last season. He went over 300 5 times. That's pretty good production, especially against an SEC schedule. His one time, funny enough, not reaching 200 yards. He had 175 against Georgia Tech at the end of the season. But as you look into those numbers a little bit more, I had to go back and remember this, but they ran the ball 39 times for 262 yards in that game, only threw 20 passes. So it's not like he had a bad game. There were some turnovers in that game, and, one of those credited to him. So you can't, completely take him off the hook. But yeah, it was an overall bad game for Georgia leading into the SEC championship game. But they were mostly running the football in that game anyway. So it's you can't put that on Carson Beck. He's a very good quarterback. If he was most other teams' quarterbacks, you would think a lot more highly of him because he was playing for a team not called the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, he's playing for a team that's not asking him to play hero ball. And right. So you're going to think that he's playing boring, and that's just simply not true. He's asking.
Well, also you just look at Georgia and you expect a good team, right? So you're like, oh, he's a good quarterback. Okay. It's like, well, not okay. That's hard to do in college football. I don't care if your name is Georgia. It's hard to go out there and be a consistently very good to sometimes great quarterback. That's hard to do. I don't care where you're playing. Alabama, they've had some quarterback issues. You see the team start to fall apart. So, like, the fact that Georgia's good is in no small part due to Carson Beck being a very good quarterback.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up the odds to be the first number 1 overall pick right now. He's also the favorite for that in that regard as we sit here in June. Obviously a long way to go for the 2025 NFL draft, but Carson Beck on a lot of teams' radars for the next level already as well. Garrett, let's go to another contender in the SEC for our number 2 quarterback. And it pains me to say this because I like to just joke that people forget about him, and I like to make him the butt of jokes, but he is a very, very good quarterback, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. All he's done is win as the starter here. I know he struggled to separate himself in his first year down in Oxford after he transferred in from USC. We kind of had some questions on whether or not he was actually good or if he was just a product of the offense. Here I am. I'm ready to swallow my pride, Garrett, and say that Jackson Dart is actually a good quarterback. I know I'm late. I know that I'm probably a year behind in this, but if you know anything about this podcast, you know that this is a big moment for me. I'm swallowing my pride, and I'm telling you right here in June 2024 that Jackson Dart is the second best quarterback in the SEC heading into this season.
That's very big of you, Trey, and I want to commend you for that. This is a big moment.
Yeah.
Somebody tag Lane Kiffin because he responds to just about anything on Twitter.
Please don't. I don't want to talk.
He doesn't want to talk about it. But no, I mean, you're right. There's a reason Jackson Dart is their starter, and it's not because of default, right? That might have been the reason a couple years ago, but you bring in Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard last season, he still ends up being the starter. When you take two quarterback transfers, you're thinking the guy that was there last year probably ain't the guy this year. But it turns out that Jackson Dart really, really elevated his game. He threw for over 3,000 yards, 3,364, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, averaged over 10 air yards per attempt. He was throwing the football. He was doing a really good job getting the ball out of his hand and really running that offense. And this was also production that was done in an offense where 271 carries went to Quinshawn Judkins and 95 went to Ulysses Bennett the fourth, or Bentley the fourth. And they ran for, I'm trying to do a little quick math in my head, but over 1,600 yards together, or maybe just at 1,600 yards together. They ran the ball a bunch, and they still ended up with over.
He ran the ball 119 times as well.
He did. He took off, and not necessarily for massive yardage. I know there's probably sack yardage incorporated and all that, but he had 8 touchdowns on the ground as well. So, put up 30 touchdowns as a quarterback, you're probably scoring the ball just fine. And he led Ole Miss to a very good record and the 16th overall scoring offense. So, look, you can, hate if you want to. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to sit here and tell us that Quinn Ewers should be number 2. We have our reasons. But Jackson Dart doing a whole lot for his team and really showing his ability to be a factor in a couple different facets of the game, being able to push the ball downfield a little bit and really run what has become one of the better offenses in college football, kind of quietly. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about Ole Miss and how incredible they are on the offense side of the football, but they've been a consistently really, really good offense, even going up against teams like Bama and Georgia and having to go up and compete against some of these top teams. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year. I think he's going to have a really, really good season. And we'll see kind of where the chips fall by the end of the year, but he's a very talented quarterback, and they're not going to lose too many games because of him.
The most impressive thing to me about him in 2023 and why he became a better quarterback in my mind, you hinted at it, Garrett. His air yards per attempt are now over 10 in 2023. And that means he's pushing the ball down the field. In 2022, he was fine, but it was very obvious that Lane Kiffin saw him as a one-read quarterback. Hey, I'm going to telegraph this play for you. I'm going to draw it up, and this is your read. You hit that read, and it's going to go for a lot of yards because I'm Lane Kiffin, and I can design good plays and exploit a defense's weaknesses. But Jackson Dart played quarterback last year. He pushed the ball downfield. It opened up the offense more. If he can make a similar jump this year, Ole Miss is certainly pushing for a spot in Atlanta and maybe even more.
Well, and the thing that's kind of understated here is when you look at what he did last year, he increased his yardage by 400 from the previous year, but threw 4 fewer passes.
Yeah.
He wasn't as necessary for their offense. He still attempted 358 passes. It's still modern football, but they run the ball so much at Ole Miss. A lot of people think of Lane's offense as this big, high-powered, throw it all over the yard type of offense, and they can certainly do that, but there's a lot of run game incorporated in that and a lot of mismatches and using the leverage well. And so, when you look at what they want to do on offense, he's not going to be, again, kind of like what we just said with Carson Beck. He's not always going to be your primary threat. Hey, you're going to be 85% of our offense tonight. That's not always going to be what happens. He's going to share the ball with the running backs. He's going to, have to deal with some of that in terms of what the game plan is, but he's still going to put up his numbers. And if he keeps improving, if he can get that completion percentage up a little bit, 65%, certainly nothing bad, but get that up to like a 67, 68%, maybe cut a couple more interceptions out, get up to 30 touchdowns. I mean, this could be a really, really special season for Ole Miss.
Absolutely. And you're right. He was more accurate, pushing the ball further down the field. That's a great sign in the development of a quarterback to see that both of those things being true. So you mentioned his name a second ago, Garrett, but our number 3 quarterback, and it was really close. Before Texas fans call me biased or call us out for being homers, listen, it was really close between Quinn Ewers and Jackson Dart. I put Quinn at 3. We put Quinn at 3 for this list for a couple of reasons in my mind. He's a great quarterback. He is a really, really good to great quarterback. But a couple of things just make me have cause for pause when I'm comparing him to, the Carson Becks and the Jackson Darts of the world. And first of all, before we get into that, that's not saying he's bad. That's just comparing him against the cream of the crop.
Yeah, we're nitpicking the top quarterbacks of the SEC. You're in that conversation. You're a very good quarterback.
You could easily end up number 1 if you're in this conversation right now by the end of the year. But if we're playing the nitpick game, and I think if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know where I'm going with this. Quinn still struggles under pressure at this point in his career. And that's can be said about a lot of quarterbacks. But if you pressure Quinn, if you get in his face, he does struggle to stay upright and he does struggle to make the play that he needs to make. So I want to see, and this was kind of the tiebreaker for me, Garrett. Obviously, Quinn had a great season last year, leading Texas to the college football playoff. Triumphant season for Quinn Ewers and that Longhorn offense. The tiebreaker to me between him and Jackson Dart is I've seen Jackson Dart do it in the SEC. I've seen Jackson Dart do it week in and week out against the best athletes and the best defenses in college football. And I know we've made much about Texas' schedule this year. I know that they got kind of the easy end of the stick on that mind, and they're not playing the top teams in the conference week in and week out. But the level of athlete, I'm going to keep saying this until I'm blue in the face this preview season. And Texas fans and Oklahoma fans are going to hate me for it, and I don't care. The level of athlete that they are going to face week in and week out in the SEC is going to be a drastic step up from what they faced in the Big 12. They're going to face more future NFL draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to face better athletes. They're going to face guys that can cover more ground than the guys in the Big 12. Big 12 has great players. Big 12 has a ton of guys that go on to make a lot of money in the league. They do not have as many per capita as the SEC. Plain and simple, that's a stated fact. You cannot dispute me on that. And it's going to be eye-opening the first time they don't bring their A game to Starkville or Fayetteville or any of these other lookover games. They're not going to get away with it like they did in the Big 12 year in and year out.
Yeah, and the thing that I want to point out just in terms, again, we're nitpicking here. We're just trying to figure out how do you split the two guys, because I don't think anybody on this podcast is going to say Quinn Ewers is a bad quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. I watched him in high school tear up my high school team. Okay, I am a local guy to, close to Southlake. Our high schools play a bunch, and he tore us up pretty good a couple years ago. And look, it's not fun watching him make every single throw on the field. Quinn, I honestly think Quinn might be the most talented quarterback in college football. He might have the highest ceiling of any quarterback in college football because when he is on, he doesn't miss, right? You can look at the Oklahoma State game. He completed 76% of his passes for 452 yards. That's disgusting. I'm sorry. That is gross. You're not allowed to do that. That's like, if you did that in, Madden or NCAA here in a couple months, people would say like, okay, bump the difficulty, right? You're clearly playing it on easy mode, right? And you can't get away with that. He did this in the Big 12 championship game against a very good Oklahoma State team. This is a very good team, and I think a lot of us expected them to put up a much bigger fight than they did. Quinn stole the show. He decided, this is my game. This is what I'm doing. And, with that, though, the little bit of inconsistency, did not show up as good against Washington. Washington with a much better defense, obviously, than what Oklahoma State was working with, but completes, 55% of his passes for the 318. Anytime you're throwing the ball more than 40 times and you only complete about half of them, you're leaving opportunity on the table for other players if you're running the football, if you're setting up screens, stuff like that. Additionally, there's a little bit of the injury concern. I know he got hurt last year, kind of a weird thing. a lot of times a quarterback gets injured, we immediately put him on the injury concern list. I don't think it's always fair, but yeah, you got to ask yourself, against better teams, against more physical players and tougher competition, bigger guys, faster guys that hit harder, is he going to be able to make it through the SEC schedule? You certainly hope so. I don't want to wish, any injury on him. That's not me. That's not what I'm going to do. But that's kind of your little concerns that separate him. But I will say this again, when Quinn Ewers is on, nobody in college football can stop him, because when he has decided he wants to play well, when he gets in the rhythm, when he gets in his zone, right? Just look at the Oklahoma game. He came out super flat, and then he turned it on, and they almost won that game. And look, when he decided
disastrous start, he couldn't
disaster of the start. Yeah, he throws 2 picks, but ends the game with an 83% completions for 346. That's pretty freaking good. That's the great quarterback right there. So when he's on, when he is feeling it, when he's in his rhythm, you can't stop him. I don't think there's anything in college football that can stop him. But when he struggles, when he gets in his head, when he gets his eyes off of the downfield guys, when he starts to kind of, get a little jittery in the pocket, that's where you start to see things mess up for him. He got rid of a lot of that in his year 1 to year 2 jump at Texas. He's going to need to do a better job of that from year 2 to year 3 to win in the SEC.
Absolutely. And I think, again, the whole team is going, and the coaching staff, and Steve Sarkisian knows this because he was a coach in the SEC. So he knows this, and he's preparing the team for this. But
yeah,
it doesn't hit until it hits, right? Like, until they get punched in the mouth and they have to make a big comeback to win a game, and a game that they're favored by multiple scores, because it's an SEC team with more talent than
it happens.
the Iowa States and the BYUs and the Houstons of the world, right? They can get away with playing crappy against Houston last year. And Quinn, I think, got hurt in that game, but they can get away with that. And I think it's going to be eye-opening for Quinn. It's going to be eye-opening for that whole program to see that firsthand. Their coaches are going to preach it to him all offseason. I know that they're already doing that because their coaching staff has seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
For 18 and 22-year-old kids, they got to see it for themselves. You know that from experience.
And another thing I think that's going to be curious about Quinn and his development, where I think he's going to do a good job. I think he's going to do well at this, but it's a X factor in terms of what do we know? We can't really prove it yet, is his ability to lead the new faces in this Texas offense. They're losing a lot of production from last year at the skill positions. Texas is always talented. They always have the players. They did great in the transfer portal. They brought in guys who can do it, but these are all still new faces to the University of Texas, right? These are guys that still have not put on the burnt orange yet. Or if they have put on the burnt orange, they've been in backup roles or maybe they played sparingly. So it's going to be their time to shine, their time to prove what they can do. But Quinn's going to have to lead that, right? As the quarterback of any team, but especially at the University of Texas, it's the U show, right? At the University of Texas, it is the Quinn Ewers show. And there's the second that you start to mess up, they're calling for the backup, right? That's just what happens at these big schools, at these big, brands. Can he lead those young players? I think he can. I think that he can figure that out. But that's another thing to see, is what happens when, you sleepwalk into Starkville and you're down 14-0 because you forgot to show up for an 11 a.m. kick in the SEC, right? It happens to everybody. And, the really good teams overcome that and win those games. Can Quinn be the leader that they need him to be? I think the answer is yes, because he's been there, he's done that. It's just something we have to wait and see about the SEC with this group of guys.
Well, let's tick off another fan base for how lowly they have their quarterback rated that made the playoff last year. Jalen Milroe checks in at number 4. If there was an award for most improved player in the country, not just the SEC, I think you give that to Jalen Milroe last year. If you could just
not just quarterbacks, most improved overall.
Player. Yeah, player. What we saw from him early in the season to what we saw at the end when he's taking down Georgia and going toe-to-toe with J.J. McCarthy in Michigan. Obviously, the game didn't end how they wanted out in Pasadena, but Jalen Milroe is a bona fide top 5 quarterback in the SEC. That's not a strong hot take, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm a little concerned about. Here's why he's not number 1 or number 2. I mentioned this a few months back when Kalen DeBoer was hired at Alabama. I'm fascinated to see how Jalen Milroe fits in that Kalen DeBoer offense as a chess piece. That's my only concern with him. He's going to be asked to throw more. He's going to be asked to learn a new offense. And the, staff at Alabama last year really tailored their offense to Jalen Milroe's skill sets. Kalen DeBoer is a fantastic coach. I'm not sitting here saying that he's going to try to make Jalen Milroe do things that he's not good at. He's just naturally going to have to throw the ball more and challenge downfield a little bit more than he did. He's not going to have Jermaine Burton to throw the ball to. That was kind of his big play guy down the field last year. So I'm just interested. Like, I'm not saying that he's going to be bad. I'm not saying that it's going to be a failure when these two styles kind of mesh. I'm just interested. And that's why he's not number 1 or number 2 to me. He's the second most proven quarterback in the SEC behind Carson Beck to me. But lots of unknowns, lots of new things that he's going to have to prove himself in. That's why he's number 4 and not higher.
Well, and they also lost Isaiah Bond to Texas, who's, that's going to be a big piece out of their offense as well. I do think that Milroe's going to have success. Like, I'm going to stand up for this guy because, again, a lot of people haven't necessarily. I'm not saying that you're picking on him, but, I think a lot of people have been really quick to just dismiss him and say, like, oh, well, Saban's gone. Oh, well, it's going to be fine. Oh, whatever. Guys, Saban, first off, was a defensive first type of guy. So, I'm not saying he didn't know how to help an offense, but he's a defensive first type of guy. I didn't love their offensive coordinator last year. You can ask, questions about him, but I didn't love what they did on the offensive side of the football last year. Their center definitely didn't help them. And, there's a good chance that we're talking about one good snap being the difference between a national championship and sending Saban out on a strong note, or, now where they are, which is not quite finishing it off in the Rose Bowl. So, one good snap, he had a receiver if he wanted to go that direction, or could have followed his lead block through the hole that was there and then disappeared before he had to pick up the football. So, look, it is what it is. No need to go nitpick one play, but Milroe's a really good quarterback. He's developed really well. He's developed his passing ability. He made some really big time throws down the stretch. You think about the end of the game against Auburn, that's big time throw. He found a guy at the back of the end zone in a play where you have to hit the end zone. They're playing, tough coverage in the end zone where you're not supposed to be able to find somebody. He put that ball on a dime to beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl and made several very, very competitive throws against a Michigan defense that was supremely talented with an extremely good back end secondary. So, obviously they didn't have the success they wanted last year. His numbers don't necessarily jump off the page at you, but he did throw the ball down the field. He's got 10.6 air yards per attempt. He had 23 touchdowns, 6 picks. He had a 172 rating. He's a good quarterback. He also adds such another element on the ground as a runner. He had 12 touchdowns on the ground. I think like 500 yards running. Yeah, 500 yards running on the ground, 12 touchdowns. He can do it all. He's a good quarterback who, if they can get it right with DeBoer, if DeBoer can get it right and coach him up and find a way to coach an offense where, he will be able to, coach a running style quarterback, a real dual threat type of quarterback, I think they're going to have a lot of success at Alabama. And again, I think the rumors of Alabama's demise will have been greatly overstated if they can figure that part out.
Yeah, he had 500 yards rushing with about 11 million sacks factored in there. So,
it's just crazy.
Yeah, his offensive line was not good last year, and that's a lot of reason why Alabama looked like they took a step back on the field. So, yeah, that's the two keys for me. Can he mesh with DeBoer, and can the offensive line, specifically the center position, take a big step forward and just set them up better for success? So that's the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe. We got one more spot here in our top 5. I've got 3 guys for you to consider, Garrett. Feel free to throw out anyone else that catches your eye, because obviously there's a lot of depth in the SEC. All right, I've been practicing this last name, Nico's last name. I've always chickened out and just said Nico. I'm going for it today, Garrett. Nico Iamaleava.
Iamaleava, I think, maybe.
I will have it
Sounds
right.
about right.
I'll have it right by August. I'm sorry, Tennessee fans. I'm sorry, Nico.
So Nico, yeah.
Nico, Connor Wegman, and Brady Cook are my 3 that I present to you for consideration. Obviously, that leaves off a few guys that are a little less proven. We've got, Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. Brock Vandegrift at Kentucky, transferring up from Georgia. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. There's a lot of guys that could be top 5 by the end of the year. Those are the next 3 for me in no particular order. And I know Nico and Connor haven't been as proven because they've been behind proven starters or injured in Connor Wegman's case, but them and Brady Cook are the 3 I'm considering for the number 5 spot. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I think it's tough, but then it's not once you realize what it is. So if you're looking at Nico, you look at Connor, you look at even Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, these are guys that have played a little bit, but you really haven't been able to see a whole bunch of. I know Connor has played a little bit more. I think he's probably the most proven of that group where, he kind of played back, third of the season a couple years ago, ended up beating LSU, finish off the year, which is pretty solid. In that season, that was just a disaster for the Aggies. And then played decently well last year. Didn't have a great game against Miami. Didn't have a lot of time. His offensive line definitely let him down.
Wasn't his fault.
Yeah,
at all.
No, not his fault. He did attempt to evade pressure about as well as you can when your offensive line it's Swiss cheese, right? It's just you can't stop anything. And so I think Connor's the most proven. I think there's a lot of people that have optimistically put him higher on these types of lists. As an Aggie fan, I don't think you can justify it quite yet. I think he is in that sort of 6 to 8 range in the SEC where he's shown you enough to show that he's plenty talented, can make a bunch of throws, but how does he fit with what Colin Klein wants to do? How does he fit? I don't know. Colin Klein has had some success with some running quarterbacks. Wegman kind of has some wheels, but not necessarily a run first type of quarterback. How can he have success with that, different style of offense? Can he pick it up in time to have some success? So that's a big question for him. I think when you look at Nico and Nussmeier, I think you're just looking and saying these guys have played like a game and looked pretty good, but I guess we'll see what happens, right? Who knows? Bowl season's weird. Anything can happen. I think you have to say Brady Cook is number 5 here. He passed for over 3,000 yards. He 21 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he led his team to one of the best seasons Missouri's had in a long time, and ultimately a Cotton Bowl victory over Ohio State. I don't see how you can put anyone else above him from this list. There's a lot of guys that maybe finish higher than him after the year. Like maybe Brady Cook doesn't, hold his own, but right now, preseason, Brady Cook's the 5th best quarterback in the SEC. He can make a bunch of throws. He's got a great group of receivers to throw to. Luther Burden's an absolute threat, and you can kind of say, screw it, Luther's down there somewhere. There's a real ability to do that. I think Brady Cook is the 5th best quarterback in the SEC, and I think there's kind of a gap right now between him and, if you want to make it Connor, you want to make it Nico, you want to make it, Garrett Nussmeier, like whoever it is, I think there's a pretty good gap between Brady Cook and whoever is next on that list.
I don't know if you're intentionally trolling Oklahoma fans by not mentioning Jackson Arnold, but if you are, props to you for continuing to.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. We're supposed to hate Oklahoma on this podcast or something. I don't know. No, Jackson Arnold, he's very talented as well.
He's in that same group where he hasn't.
Yeah, he's in that group of hadn't really done a whole bunch, hadn't gotten to prove himself yet. Very talented, very, very talented. But again, you're not really sure. And I don't know that this is the year for an Oklahoma quarterback to break out. We talked about that again. Oklahoma fans, don't hate us. You have a tough schedule. Don't hate us. Hate the SEC offices who gave you this schedule. That's not our fault. We didn't make the schedule for your first year and force you to play like 5 or 6 of the top teams from last year. So I don't know that this is the year for an Oklahoma quarterback to break out, but I'd love it if you prove me wrong and Oklahoma turned out to be a force. So I don't think there's anybody who's really proven very much underneath that. I'm kind of scraping the bottom after that and saying, I guess Diego Pavia was pretty okay. Peyton Thorne has better weapons this year, maybe. I guess Taylon Green was okay. He'll be good for Arkansas, maybe.
Taylon Green was
good at Boise State, and he ain't got nothing at Arkansas to help him, but it's neither here nor there. So I don't know. Yeah. I think right now you have to say Brady Cook's number 5, and then there's a group of very talented unprovens, and then there's everybody else. Thanks for playing SEC football.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we re-ranked it at the end of the year because there's several guys that could make a case for number 1 maybe by the end of the year if they take a few extra steps. Well, we're going to take a short break, and then we will be right back with the Big 12, our final Power 4 conference to rank quarterbacks. Well, we are back to break down the top 5 quarterbacks in the new look Big 12, 16 teams, a lot of former Pac 12 teams, of course, the former G5 teams in the mix as well. And a lot of the newcomers are going to take over this top 5 list. It's newcomers in the Sunflower State to spoil it just a little bit. We'll start at the top, and this might be a controversial take to some that have anointed our number 2 quarterback as the number 1 pick in the draft, but Jalen Daniels of Kansas is our number 1 quarterback in the Big 12 entering 2024. He's followed closely behind by number 2 Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado.
In my opinion, not that close behind. I know that we're supposed to love Shedeur, and he's a very, very talented player, but I think that Jalen Daniels stands head and shoulders above the rest of the Big 12 in terms of what he brings to the table for Kansas. He's an extremely good quarterback. I think he's proven it in his time at Kansas. He's, a leader. He's put up lots and lots of points. And so I don't see how you don't look at Jalen Daniels as this top quarterback. He can do it all. He can run, he can pass, and he's got a pretty good team around him that I think, when you look at the system that they have him in, you look at what they're able to do offensively, you look at some of the strides Kansas has made these last several years, Jalen Daniels is a massive part of that, right? He's a huge part of why Kansas is in the position they're currently in, and why, even last week we were talking about, well, Kansas hitting 9 wins seems like a pretty good bet. If Kansas hits 9 wins, I mean, we're talking about a different era of college football, and the experience and the leadership of Jalen Daniels is the biggest reason why for that Kansas program. He's a very talented quarterback, and I think that when you look at what anybody else in that conference has proven, there's maybe one other guy with a resume that looks like what Jalen Daniels has done, but maybe has a couple more injury concerns than what Daniels has. But nobody else in this conference has done what Jalen Daniels has been able to do at Kansas.
Well, and Jalen Daniels has injury concerns as well. So this is predicated on him completing.
Not as many as the other guy with the accolades.
Well, yes, and we'll get to him in just a minute. But I will say Jalen Daniels has yet to complete a full season as a starting quarterback. So the Jayhawks have to find a way to keep him healthy. I don't know if that's running less and trusting his arm more, if that's blocking better, like whatever that needs to be, he needs to be on the field for this to come to fruition. And if he's on the field, he's electric. When he's on the field, he's without a doubt the most exciting quarterback in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And he just has to stay on the field. It's that plain and simple. If he can stay on the field, I think your Kansas 9-win movement has a great chance. And he's going to
we're hoping for
a lot of fun. Defense can step up a little bit at times too, just be opportunistic. Mm-hmm. Jalen can stay healthy. We're going to be partying like it's 2007 Lawrence. And I think we're all here for that as college football fans. But to make the case for Shedeur Sanders, if you put him on almost any other college football team last year, he's in New York. His numbers were just outlandish for an offense and a team really that just couldn't buy a win down the stretch of the season. And obviously, it's really easy to hate on Coach Prime, to hate on what they're doing in Colorado. And I would put the odds, I would take the under on their win total. I think it's at 5.5 right now. And I would confidently bet the under at 5.5. But you can't deny the talent that he is putting out here. He is not the problem at Colorado. And he is not going to be the problem at Colorado this year. They asked him to throw the ball 430 times last year. He completed 69.3% of his passes, over 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. That doesn't even take into account his running prowess. He ran the ball really well, just doesn't show in the stats because he has negative 77 yards because of all the sacks that he took.
He took a lot of sacks.
And I don't know that they've improved that offensive line. So I don't know that he's going to get to be the number 1 quarterback in the Big 12, because can you be the number 1 quarterback in your conference if you don't lead your team to a bowl game? I don't think so. So that's a big tiebreaker for me. Talent on the field. He might get drafted. I think he will get drafted much higher than Daniels in the NFL draft next year, but that's not what we're breaking down. We're breaking down best college quarterbacks right now in their college career. And that's why I lead Daniels over Sanders.
Yeah, and Shedeur Sanders is extremely talented. Let me make a comparison real quick, not in terms of play style. They do not play the same style
They
of
don't.
football.
Yeah, that's a very lazy comparison.
Well,
If we
but
were going to use that.
so in terms of Shedeur Sanders, here's the comparison that I want to make. I think Shedeur Sanders suffers from a similar thing that Phillip Rivers did when he was in the NFL, where if you were to ask me who are some of the most talented quarterbacks of the last 20, 25 years, Phillip Rivers has to be on that list. He has to be towards the top of that list. He's extremely talented. They just never won. They just didn't win when it mattered. And that's kind of what Shedeur struggled with last year. I know it's just one sample size and you got one game and it's a much bigger game than just the quarterback. He's seriously talented. Shedeur Sanders is on this list not because of what Colorado did last year, but because of what he does. But at a certain point, when it comes to legacy and when it comes to the way that we think of you as a quarterback, winning has to matter. And so the same way that we don't think of Phillip Rivers as one of the top quarterbacks of the last 20, 25 years, we shouldn't also think of that for Shedeur Sanders. He put up crazy numbers, like you were saying, really, really solid numbers. And if he had anything resembling an offensive line, who knows what those numbers could have ended up being. But he has to win games. You have to beat teams. You have to find ways to win games. And it's not like he was going up against every juggernaut in the Pac-12 last year. There were some winnable games that he probably should have found a way to lead his team to win. He just didn't. And again, that's nothing on him. This was his first year playing Division I football, right? That's his first year doing that. That's his first real experience doing that. He put up a great performance for them. But the differentiation right now is Jalen Daniels has taken a program in Kansas that couldn't win and made them winners. Shedeur Sanders hasn't done that for Colorado yet. He can make them winners. I believe he can make them winners. I think Colorado can, kind of jump over and succeed, but it's going to be about if Shedeur can actually take them there. It's a big if in my book. I think a lot of people are expecting Colorado to make that jump. I'm a little bit hesitant. I'm not going to be the biggest Colorado homer on this podcast and certainly not in the media, but I think that it's there, it's available, but it's an if in terms of leadership and being able to take his team over the hump and start to put some wins in that win column.
There's a lot of believers. Colorado has the most handle bet on them at I think it's FanDuel that tweeted that out. The most handle
For
bet
what,
on
making a bowl game or
to win the national championship.
to win the national championship?
Someone can fact check me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. I saw a tweet last week.
Look, you're probably right because there's a lot of people betting on that. And look, I like the excitement. Don't get me wrong. I love the excitement and I love what's happened at Colorado with the just absolute resurgence of a dead team that, nobody cared. You win one game a couple seasons ago and you're like, oh, well, it's Colorado. Who cares? They suck. They're bad. And the resurgence that's happened and we talked about it, but they won, several games last season. They could have won a bunch more. They probably should have won a bunch more. They probably should have made a bowl game. If they make a bowl game this season, they're doing what Kansas has done the last couple of years and taking a team that season. I think the national championship hype is maybe a little overblown, but if they can go if Colorado wins 8 games this season, that's a very successful season for the Buffaloes.
Oh, absolutely. We're partying like it's 2016 in Boulder.
There it is.
If we're winning 8 games. So let's move on down the list, Garrett. Also in the Sunflower State, we have a young gun, the highest rated quarterback that Kansas State has ever signed, Avery Johnson. He takes over late in the year for Will Howard. We talked about that situation on Tuesday's show. You can go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But Avery Johnson was the young hotness at quarterback at Kansas State. And they're pushing all their chips into the middle of the table and betting on him, foregoing another year of eligibility on Will Howard, a very accomplished quarterback in his own right. But Avery Johnson showed some amazing flashes last year, and he showed why he was ranked as high as he was in the recruiting process. I'm all in on him as well. I think that he could very well lead Kansas State to a conference title and a college football playoff berth this year, and he's going to put on a show in that offense in Manhattan. He could be a missing piece that takes Kansas State to a level we haven't seen in quite some time.
Yeah, and he's extremely talented, I think there were some things to be desired in terms of his actual performance on the field. Only completes 56% of his passes. That's got to improve, obviously. Obviously, that's got to improve. We know that. But man, what he can do with his legs, the way that he can really get after it on the ground, he's extremely talented. And I think my big concern, if you can say any, right? He's super talented, looks really good. He's going to be plenty, plenty good in this Kansas State offense. I wonder what losing Colin Klein does to him, right? I wonder what happens now that he's lost his offensive coordinator. Is it a tougher adjustment to pick up this new offense? Is the new offense going to be similar enough to be able to kind of just let it translate? And the big thing is it's not going to really show itself in his legs because you can always just kind of take off and run and make something happen. But does he take that step in the passing game that we want him to take to make him one of these top quarterbacks in the Big 12? I think he can. He's plenty talented. That's not the question, obviously. It's more just about, does he do it? Does he do it fast enough this year? And then if he can, look out, because Kansas State could be, at the top of the Big 12 by the end of the season.
Yeah, got the chance to start the bowl game. Wasn't great. 14 of 31 for 178 yards and a couple touchdowns. But it was against an NC State defense that I'm always gonna carry water for the Wolfpack defense as long as Dave Doran's there running that 3-3-5. So he can grow a lot. Obviously, he was a true freshman last year. I think he's ready for an expanded role and a full season to start. I'm really excited to see what he can do. Garrett, a little bit different in the Big 12 versus the other conferences. We actually filled out the top 5. We're not going to have a debate for the last 1 or 2 spots here because I think they're pretty straightforward. A couple more newcomers to the conference, but not a newcomer to college football. We've got old man Cam Rising at Utah at number 4. I'm assuming he's playing. We were on Cam Watch all year last year, it seemed like, until they finally announced that he would just be punting and coming back for year 7 of eligibility for him this year. He's a big reason. When he's healthy, he is one of the most underrated quarterbacks, not just in the Big 12, but all of college football. And he's a big reason why I'm so high on Utah finally breaking through and making it to the playoff this year.
Yeah, and Utah is gonna look. I'm a little bit of a Utah homer on this podcast, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I've been sticking up for Cam Rising the last several years since he took over. Obviously, last year, not really, because he wasn't able to play, and you saw the glaring difference in that offense with Cam Rising not playing. But with him out there, Utah is one of the better teams in the Big 12, and in my opinion, should be, in Arlington at the end of the year. If everything goes the way that it should, they always play great defense in Utah. They know their offense. They know what to do. They play a real physical style, and man, they should just be really, really good. So for Cam, really, it's just going to be, can you stay upright this year? Like, can you bounce back? He's surprisingly athletic, right? He's got a lot of ability to run the football. A lot of people don't necessarily always see. He threw for over 3,000 yards a couple of years ago. And oh yeah, by the way, he led his team to a couple consecutive Rose Bowls and won the Pac-12 a couple years in a row. So one of the more accomplished quarterbacks, definitely the most accomplished quarterback in the Big 12. He's been in the big spots more than anybody else has. Really, we're just saying, can you stay upright? Can you bounce back from the injury and prove that you're still the quarterback that you were a couple of years ago? If you can, watch out. If not, then, I guess it could be another long season for Utah, watching their defense play lights out and then, get like 76 passing yards per game or something like that.
Well, there's a lot of options for number 5 here. I'm thinking DeQuan Finn transferring down to Baylor could be interesting.
Good quarterback.
Becht in year 2 at Iowa State. Baron Morton finally has some weapons to throw to at Texas Tech. Heck, KJ Jefferson at UCF might be really slept on. I think he's going to be a beast that smells on offense. But at number 5, we're going with Noah Fifita out at Arizona. This is a guy that was on no one's radar to start 2023 because he was behind Jaden DeLaura, a guy that we had in the top 5 quarterbacks of the Pac-12 in last year's preseason. DeLaura gets hurt midway through last year, and all Fifita does is come off the bench, throw for almost 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and lead Arizona to the best season they've had in quite some time. So obviously a lot has changed in Arizona. Jedd Fisch is off to Washington, new coaching staff, new vision for that program, but a lot of the guys stayed. They were nervous that they were going to lose Noah in the portal. He stays. A lot of playmakers are staying as well. And they're one of the favorites to at least get a spot in Arlington for the Big 12 championship this year. They got a tough road, not as clear cut as some other teams, but I think they've got the quarterback to make a run at it.
Oh, for sure. And a very, very good season for Fifita. I think he's maybe one of the more underappreciated players in college football. He performed extremely well, completed 72% of his passes last season. That's pretty dang good for a
bench, right? Like that's just something that you never expect from your backup.
And I mean, pretty much from the word go, I mean, his first game was, against Northern Arizona. I think was that week 1 or week 2. I mean, I know that he didn't start that game, obviously played some, reserve roles, but by the time they hit, Washington at the end of September, he was their starter and he didn't really look back. And I mean, he loses his first couple games against Washington and USC, and then he just rattles off a bunch of victories and beats some very good teams. And so, I think, especially I'm looking at this performance too. Arizona State, finish off your regular season, throws for 527 on 73% completions. I talked about Quinn being disgusting a little bit earlier in this podcast. That's disgusting. That is offensive. Nobody should be allowed to do that. And it comes out with a 216 rating at the end of that game. Jeez, man, that's just video game numbers. So, look, he's a good quarterback, and they beat Oklahoma in the bowl game, and are off and running. So I think this could be a really good season for Fifita. At this point, you just have to ask yourself, what does that offense look like now that Jedd Fisch is gone? Is the offense going to be able to stay up? They still have some playmakers, still have some very good receivers. It's just all about, can they keep the offense rolling? Can they, continue to succeed now that Fisch is gone? And if they can, kind of start well, get some momentum on their side, I think this could, again, be a really good season for Arizona. And a lot of the thing that these teams are seeing is there's some good quarterbacks that if they play up to these standards, right? If Jalen Daniels plays up to their standards, it's going to be a great season. If Avery Johnson plays up to standards, it's going to be a great season. If Cam Rising plays up to standards, it's going to be a great season. So this is a conference where they have some quarterbacks that could prove the outcome depending on their performances, right? Like if all of those quarterbacks end up playing really well, then look out. There's going to be some good football played in the Big 12. And if those guys start to fall short, that'll be the storyline, right? Like if Avery Johnson at Kansas State doesn't improve his passing ability, then Kansas State's not going to be that good and they'll drop out of the contention, and that's that. But again, if all these quarterbacks play really well and play up to what they can do, Big 12 is far from dead. They're going to be one of the more fun conferences to watch all season long.
Yeah, I'm not joking when I say there are legitimately 10 teams I could see making a run at the Big 12 title this year. I rattled off a lot of their quarterbacks, but I didn't even get to, Garrett Green at West Virginia, who PFF somehow has like the highest rated returning quarterback.
Very good quarterback, and he could prove himself.
And we have another geriatric unit guy in Alan Bowman at Oklahoma State.
Alan Bowman, yeah.
You can't discount the experience that he has. So, and he has a lot of talent around him with your guy Ollie Gordon too. So, there's a lot of fun guys in the Big 12. I can't wait to see how it shakes out. But guys, let us know. Let us know what you think. Where did we get right? What did we get wrong in the top 5 quarterbacks for each of the power conferences? And make your voice heard in our community as well. Go rank your teams. Make your prediction for this year. How are the power conferences going to turn out? You can find those links on our Twitter in the description in this video and on all of our social channels at 3TechPod on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure that you're getting entered to win that gift card and special surprise prize that I'm promising and is definitely going to happen, right? I'll once I figure out what it is, I'll tell you guys exactly what it is. So for that man over there, Mr. Garrett Turney, for Mitch Mason, I'm Trey Reeves, and we will see you guys next time.
Gracious him. How about